Hello, everyone. Welcome to this LinkedIn Live, 1080 LinkedIn Live Career Insights. I'm Dean Jamson. I'm going to be hosting it. And I have to say, I've said this once before when these two fine gentlemen have joined me on a previous LinkedIn Live, that we've got the big guns with us today. We're bringing out all the big guns. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves first of all. Michael, can I doff my cap in your direction for an intro, please?
Well, that's very kind of you, Dean, and you're definitely overstating the case when it comes to big guns. Michael Moran, director of 1080, career coach, and hopefully you've been able to add something to people today on how you network, particularly if you're reluctantly doing so. I'll hand over to Neil. Neil.
Yes,
Thank
Neil.
you, Michael. Thank you, Dean. Yeah, so my name's Neil Munns-Jones, as my title says here. So I wrote this book, The Reluctant Networker, and the clue is in the title. So I am a networker, but I'm a reluctant one. And so I give talks about networking. I'm also a coach with 1080 and a consultant. But today I've got my networking hat on. Looking forward to it.
Marvellous. Thank you, gentlemen. So what we're going to do then is we start off with the first of my questions. And I think from some of the coaching that I've been doing recently, in particular in the career space, I am finding more and more people saying, "Oh, I feel a bit awkward about networking. I feel a bit meh about approaching people." So that feels like a good place to start. While Neil was having a slurp, Michael, perhaps you can give your thoughts on this then. So why do people find networking awkward, do we think?
Well, I'm going to start with a situation I think that most people find familiar, which is like when you go to a wedding and you put next to somebody you don't know, and there's that sort of, how on earth do I get conversation going, and I don't want to be somebody asking me 20 questions. I'm coming to a wedding to enjoy myself. So I don't think as human beings, we're natural with talking to strangers. And consequently, most people's perception of networking is, oh, I've got to talk to strangers, I've got to sell myself, it's not something I do naturally. And that's why people are reluctant to do it. I'm going to say ultimately, I don't think they necessarily understand what networking is, but we'll come to that. But it's human interaction with people you don't know. And inevitably, for most people, that means it's awkward.
Okay. Neil, so do you think it's the same thing? It's like it's just a bit out of their comfort zone and there's no habit or good positive habit there about it. Is that your thoughts as well?
So I think it depends. So I would say it depends what kind of networking you're doing. That the same person can say, "Oh, I don't mind doing that," but other bits, "Oh yeah, a bit awkward." And I think particularly in the sort of jobs, when you're searching for a job, there's a difference because you need something from your networking, and people find that awkward. And I had a very interesting discussion with a lady who came up to me after one of my talks, and she said, "Oh, a few weeks ago, up till a few weeks ago, I had this really good job, and people were asking me for help because they were out of work." And she said, "I was always really flattered, and I gave lots of time. And then I lost my job, and the boot's on the other foot, and suddenly I'm the one asking for help." And she said, "Even though I know lots of other people out there like me want to help me, I just find it a bit awkward having to ask for help." So I think it depends on the circumstances of that you're in, can encourage this awkwardness.
Okay, interesting. I think all three of us, when we've been coaching, we've faced and challenged in a positive way that awkwardness and had conversations around it. I think for me, and the next question is a really good testimony to that, is the sorts of questions that we get asked in those situations. And quite recently, somebody's asked this to me. So, well, what if I don't know someone, but I want to make a connection with them? What do I do? So the question out to you both is, well, what positive steps can I take if that was me? Neil, I'll perhaps go straight to you on this one. I'm sure you've got something in your Reluctant Networker book that can help with this.
Yeah, I think it's got to be via referral. If you just sort of cold call someone, message them on LinkedIn, and go, "I'm looking for some work, and you're in the industry. Would you mind having a chat?" That's a lot harder than finding somebody who know, let's say there's somebody who knows them. So LinkedIn's great because you can put that person into LinkedIn and you see who your mutual second degree connections are and get a referral that way. The minute you're referred, the door is open. There's a bit of connectivity, and the conversation then is, how do you know so and so that connected us, and off you go. And it doesn't have to be on LinkedIn. It could be just sort of, talking to people, about, look, I'm looking to get into this sector. Do you know this person? So I think for me, it is about getting referred, and then it's so much easier.
Okay. And Michael, I know you're really good at this. So there's going to be a good, because I've seen this quite recently with you about that whole, who do I know? How do I make that connection? So what can you add to what Neil said about positive steps we can take?
Well, and Neil's quite right. You want a connection. You want contacting people you don't know with no connection is difficult, and I'll come back to that. But if you do have a connection, then the obvious line at the outset, and don't be disingenuous, but it's to say something nice about somebody, that the person referring you speaks highly of you, or he says you're an industry expert, or you're a good person to know. And you were doing that to me, Dean, just then, sort of trying to make me feel good about myself. That's my first point. But my second point is, and I think it's where most people don't understand networking. Networking is much more about what can you do for that person, as opposed to what can they do for you. Yes, I know ultimately you want them to do something for you, but you need to create credits at the bank. So the second phase of this conversation should be around, let me talk, let's have a conversation. And what can I find out about you, which in turn I can use either in the conversation or latterly to add value. And then the third piece is, at that stage, you're asking for advice or something. You're not asking for, don't drop straight in, I want an introduction to so-and-so. You're asking for, if you was me, what would you do in this situation? So through a connection, say something nice, find out about them, get information. Can I add value to them? And then ask for advice. If you don't know someone and you don't have a connection, then it's much more difficult. But what you should always try to do is find, is there some common link? So, for example, maybe you had worked in the same company, but at different times, or rely on the fact that you've got sector experience and there are certain people that you know which you think will resonate with the person you're trying to contact. So you're trying to find those links that will at the very least say, I'm somebody who knows such and such, or knows somebody, and therefore it's worth meeting. But I accept that is quite difficult. And coming back to Neil's point, always try to find the connection.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, and I think that probably adds to the awkwardness if you don't know a connection, but actually, or if you haven't looked. And I think that's one of the things is, I often say to people, well, have you looked what connections you might have that are in common? And quite often people say, well, no, I haven't. So I think it's a really, really good point to do that.
And building on that, I mean, LinkedIn's great because you can see their profile. So I had a conversation with a lady yesterday through a referral, but I could see her connections. I looked up our mutual connections, saw some common ones, and went, she must have worked at that company. And lo and behold, she had, and I'd done some consulting there. And so we started off the conversation about that shared experience, and that starts to build the rapport. Then you get onto the worky bit, and it all just feels more, it flows more.
Yeah. Okay.
And indeed, before you move on, one other thing I think which is common by reluctant networkers is they do know the person, but they haven't spoken to them for a long time. I worked with them 10 years ago, and your fear is that, well, I'm only going to contact this person, and they know I'm going to be contacting them for a reason, but I haven't kept in touch. And so I think that's an awkwardness that a lot of reluctant networkers share. My answer to that is, if someone let's reverse the situation. If someone called you out of the blue and you'd not spoke to them in 10 years, and they said something like, oh, I came across you on LinkedIn, I saw we weren't connected, or I met somebody who we had a mutual connection and your name came up in conversation, are you likely to turn that call down? No, we're not.
No.
So you've just got to, it does require a little bit of bravery on your part, but, you know, re-establishing people that you know, provided you like them and they like you, is not as difficult as you imagine. But I accept that often does put a lot of reluctant networkers off. I've not spoken to them in 10 years.
Yeah. And I often find, go on, Neil.
I was just going to, there is a tip in The Reluctant Networker, funnily enough, that says it's never too late to get back in touch with people. People do want to hear. So it is, as Michael said, be a bit brave, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that most people that you reconnect with, so long as, to Michael's point, you had a good relationship with them in the past. Of course, it would be great if you'd kept in touch along the way, but if you haven't, take this opportunity of needing to talk to them to reconnect. But then don't do it again. Don't get a reputation that you only ever ring when you want something. Then keep in touch.
Yeah, and the number of people I think who do that, and then afterwards think, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So that awkwardness is the barrier that we built up, isn't it, in our own heads? The other question I wanted your thoughts on, or one of the other questions, was again something that comes up quite a lot in career coaching, is when somebody wants to do, you know, a career pivot, they want to go in a different direction. They feel like they've got the skill set to do that, but the network, perhaps they don't feel supports the career pivot. Or so the question I've got there is, if I was considering a career pivot, what approach can I take to network in that new sector? And Michael, I'll come to you first on that one, if I may.
Well, let's go back to some basics. The four sources of a network are people you've worked with, your clients, your suppliers, and professional peers. So I'm going to continue the theme. Obviously, using connections is key, but recognizing that most people's network is around the sector in which they've worked. So a couple of things I think you need to start to look for. You need to find out people who've made similar transitions, who've moved from your sector to the sector. Talking to suppliers, because typically, yes, some suppliers will focus on one sector, but you will find that they do provide services in other sectors. And I'm also not going to rule out the using professional peers and friends. One thing I've discovered in career coaching and using networking, sometimes it's the most unexpected people that you haven't got strong relationships with, but who seem to go the extra mile for you. And indeed, sometimes people you think, oh, they'll definitely be able to help me, they won't. So sometimes it's really important to look at the periphery of your network, you know, friends, relations, neighbors, you know. I've seen this work very successfully with people who've been watching their son or daughter play rugby or hockey, having a conversation on the touchline, and that's led to, oh, yes, I know somebody in that field. So thinking laterally about your networking connections, whether it's colleagues who've moved out of a sector, whether it's suppliers into that new sector, or professional peers, I think you'll find quite fruitful for a career pivot. What do you think, Neil?
Yes, absolutely. I think my comments on that question are, well, I think the first point is, if you want to make a career pivot, you absolutely have to network. Relying on job adverts, I was saying to Dean when we were talking about this yesterday, I talked to some headhunters and they said even the few companies that say, oh, give me a few wildcard candidates who haven't got sector experience, they said they never hire them. They always go for the safe pair of hands. So the only way you're going to get a job in a different sector is through networking. So that's kind of the first point. And then, using your network to, like I say, as Michael was saying, those just casual conversations, just telling people, because we are human and we want to help. And then back to our good friend, LinkedIn is your friend, because you go and research who are the companies in this sector, put them into LinkedIn, and you'll see who are the employees, where have you got a second degree connection, and then just go and have conversations, go and talk to people, and not, as Mike was saying, ask for advice, flatter them, see if you can help them. Because every conversation, you're building your knowledge about, A, is this even a sector that I want to get into, so you understand it more? B, when you get an interview, you can talk more knowledgeably about it. And then also you're starting to build potential connections for the future as well in the long run, not just to get this job.
And I think with that, and in particular, when we go on to something that Michael's already touched on about if you've lost contact with people, is actually think about the questions you want answering. Think about the questions you want to ask of those connections. Things like, I'm thinking about switching to a career or pivoting into the sector that you're now in. How did you go about it? What were the steps that you did? How, you're not asking them to do it for you, but you're asking to gain some valuable knowledge from their experiences. But if we don't have much of a network, and I know we've talked a little bit about lost contact with people, well, what can we do? Michael, you've already mentioned a few things. While you try and think of adding to that, I'm gonna dip straight back to Neil, put him on the spot for a change. So what can we do then?
So I think my first bit would be to challenge the statement a little bit, to go, if you don't have much of a network, I think it's probably much of an active network. So particularly as you go onwards in your career, we all come across a lot of people. And so we might think we don't have a network, but actually if you mapped out everywhere you'd worked, all of the, universities or wherever you've studied, there's one of the things I talked to my coaches a lot about, more people than you think. So when I look them up on LinkedIn, I go, oh, it's only got 69 connections. Like even students or recent graduates know more than 69 people on LinkedIn. So I think it's about activating / reactivating the network and taking this opportunity, because the trouble is, when we have work, we don't have a lot of time to network because we're just busy doing our jobs. Now we're out of work. The good news is we've got a lot of time to do it. So let's use this opportunity, take that time to reactivate the network and just get back in touch with people. As I said, it's never too late to do it. Just be a bit brave. And then use our network to get referred in and make new connections. So yeah, I think most people have a bigger network than they think. It's about how active is it, and now's the time.
Okay, Michael.
So reiterating absolutely what Neil says, if you go through your CV and think about, who are you working with, who are your clients, who are your suppliers, I appreciate you may not have built a relationship with those people or stayed in touch, but you do have a network. And certainly, if you've been working 5 or 10 years, you should be able to put together what I'm going to say between 30 and 60 people who you've come across in some capacity. But then you have to start building that relationship, and it comes back to my philosophy of around, what do I know? What can I do to share what I know and add value to people? Whether that's personally, i.e., thinking about when, if you're talking to people and you're talking about them, they'll tell you about their children going to university or wedding anniversaries or holidays they've had. You're looking for connections that you can say, I've been there, I can recommend a hotel, or I can recommend a restaurant, or even locally, I can recommend an electrician. Today, I think it's relatively easy to start adding value to people because of the way information is. The lost contact piece is, and the post office doesn't have much good press at the moment, I know, but they did have a very clear advert a few years ago, which was around the Christmas time, and they were trying to encouraging people to send Christmas cards, I think. And I think it showed 2 guys or 3 guys down the pub having a conversation. And during that course of that conversation, another person who they'd worked with, I think, came up in conversation. And then the guy went home and put the postcard in the post, which said, your name came to conversation. I just thought of you. So, and a bit corny, but hey, what a nice introduction. I.e., you're saying you don't even need at that point to do anything other than say, your name came from conversation, so I referred you. I thought I would reach out to LinkedIn on connection. Or another way is to actually say, I thought we were connected on LinkedIn. I see we're not. Shall we now connect? Shall we catch up? And repeat, at that level, you don't need to start engaging around, I'm job seeking or I want some advice. What you're doing is building a relationship. Then the next conversation goes into, well, what have they told you about their life or their career? And do I know anything they can do to help them? And only at the third phase do I then say, now, by the way, at that point, they'll ask about you, and you have the perfect opportunity to talk about what you're trying to achieve in your career and seek advice. Does that give you two ideas, Dean, on how you can resurrect your old relationships with people?
It
people
does.
you've forgotten about.
Yeah, it does. And I think from what both of you are saying about not just the relationship, but the active nature of your network, is I think actually it's really worth doing something we've all spoken about before, about actually looking at what's the status or where are people in your network now? Because if you've not been that active, then people have probably moved, and you might not necessarily know that they've moved. And therefore, actually re-examining who your network is and where people are, you may find that you're pleasantly surprised that people you do know have actually moved into a different sector where actually they're now, it may be worth that virtual or real time cup of coffee. We've got a question from Alison. Assuming people are busy, how do you request their time that is compelling? So how do we ask in a compelling way for a bit of their time? And I'm guessing with a little bit of this is that if you've been kind and you've helped them in the past, that they'll find the time. But what's your thoughts on this one, gentlemen? Neil.
I suppose back to the flattery bit. I think one of the good things about digital virtual networking is it's quite time efficient. So I was used to think when you go and ask to have a coffee with somebody, you kind of can't do it for less than an hour. Whereas actually now on Zoom or Teams or whatever you use, a kind of half-hour catch up, even less. You could probably say, look, just could I have 20 minutes.
Okay.
At the end of the day, so not right in the middle of their working day. So and say, I think the mindset of just we are humans and we are naturally collaborative. We want to help people out, but we need to ask for help and then make it easy for people to help us. So be kind of specific about what it is we're after, and making it easy is that look, a 20 minute half an hour Teams call at the end of the day when it's convenient would be great. So yeah, I think making it easy, but you got to ask.
Yeah. Okay.
So saying nice things about them. I'm also going to say, being mindful of their time and assuming this may be someone knowing when's a good time to catch them, and how you do it. So I found, for example, using text tends to be quiet, or FaceTime can be more important than sending them an email. So if you know their habits, don't try them on a Monday morning first thing, or probably even Friday afternoon the last thing. Be patient. Going back one, Dean, to your question earlier around, so I'm also going to advocate you be quite systematic. So in terms of how you stay in touch with people, at least twice a year, go through your LinkedIn connections, do that downloading exercise, and it will tell you if they've moved a job. It's simple. Another thing I will do is I'll go back and look at my diary, see who I saw in the last not the last 12 months, but the 6 months before that. Have I engaged with them? If not, should I put them in my diary for a catch up? So being systematic, having a good network of 60, 80 people, it's a bit like being a gardener. It requires you to nurture that. You can't, and I think a lot of people know when they're looking for jobs, then now's the time I've got to go out. Well, actually, we should be networking and thinking about that network all the time, but in a systematic way and in a way where you're trying to help people. Because trust me, with that type of approach, they will come on to you at certain times.
And I'd add another systematic but random thing to do is go on LinkedIn every day and go on My Network and catch up and see who's got a birthday or a work anniversary or a promotion or a job anniversary, all these things. And if you do that systematically, so I try and do it every working morning, and it's 5 minutes, no more than that. And if you do that systematically over the course of a year, you will be just sending a nice, flattering message. Oh, happy birthday. How are you? I haven't spoken to you. I did one yesterday, and all I got was a thumbs up. But that's, they're then at least thinking of me. But often I'll get it. Oh, how are you? I haven't spoken to you for ages, and we end up having a catch up. So that's another nice. And so building on Michael's 60 to 80, where you're a bit more proactively managing that group. Once you get to, I think I've probably got about 3,000 connections on LinkedIn. I can't manage all of them actively, but if I do that, I will send most of them a message once a year, which is also just a little way of keeping in touch.
Yeah. Interesting. I must admit, I do that on Facebook, but I hadn't thought to do that on LinkedIn. So that's something new for me to do on my network.
Good tip, Neil. Good tip.
Yeah.
Like it.
We had another question come in, which was actually related to the method of contact. And I think we've covered this a little bit, but I'll put it onto the screen anyway. Is what would you say the best ways to get in touch with people? For example, would you say direct emails are better than LinkedIn messaging? And what you were both saying independently of each other was thinking about how well do you know the person and what's the best method that they might respond to. Would that be something you'd agree with, or anything else to add to that?
I think personally, if I know people well enough, I like Michael's suggestion. The kind of WhatsApp message is more informal, likely to get a reply than an email. I do quite a lot of sort of the people I know less well, probably a LinkedIn direct message. But it varies. And one of the things we do in our consulting business is if you're not getting a reply, change the medium. So because some people like text, some people like email.
Okay.
And I don't like using LinkedIn messaging because I think it depends how active that person is, how often they go in. So I always try to find an email address. And of course, then there's some very old-fashioned ways. You can call them on their mobile.
Shock horror.
And indeed, the odds are they won't get the call, but you will get a voice message. So you can say it. So sometimes it's just about being, if you understand the person and know how they operate, try to communicate in a way that they're going to receive and take the call.
And I have occasionally phoned, left the voicemail, and then just followed it up with an email saying, "Hi, I've just left you a voicemail." So
my little tip with voicemail is repeat your phone number a second time, because it means they don't have to play the message again. They've got time to reach for a pen and write it down. It also implies a little bit more importance of calling you back. We've had a couple of nice comments along the way, gentlemen, as well. Really enjoying the discussion, such valuable insights, incredible how powerful and effective casual conversations networking can lead to opportunities.
Thank you, Elise.
And Sarah saying, really interesting. I think we forget there's a mutual benefit for both parties when we can support each other. Generally, people like to help and offer support. I would totally.
That's a really important mindset. When you need something, is always do, but also, is there any way I can help you? And you'll be pleasantly surprised that there are ways, and it just makes the conversation a bit more equal.
And it's interesting because a wise man once told me, when I said I feel quite lucky with some of the business I've generated since working for myself, and a wise man called Michael Moran said to me, it's not luck, Dean, you invested in your network. So there you go, Michael, that one's come back to you.
Thank you.
And Chris is saying many of our clients are startup businesses. Both Michael and Neil have built successful businesses via networking. Would you share the approach you used? Which really brings me on to, because of time, our last bit, we can combine that with tips to make networking more comfortable, whether it's setting up for yourself or otherwise. What's our top tips? Neil?
Okay. So for me, it's all about your mindset, change your mindset. So when you need something, you need a job, or, when I was setting up, I needed some leads. if you think about when you're applying for a job, it's kind of a one shot. You either get it or you don't, and if you don't, that's it. Bit of a waste of time. But with networking, always think about this. Even if you network with somebody and they can't help you find a job, they might have given you some interesting information, but it's the beginning of a relationship that continues in the future. So view it as both this short-term thing that might help you get a job and probably will give you some information and maybe some more contacts, but also it's the beginning of something that could turn out amazing benefits in a year, or in 5 years, 10 years. And I think that helps to kind of settle people down that it's that I'm networking for the long term here. So okay. I think for me, that's this, I talk about networking is about long-term relationships of mutual benefit.
Okay, Michael.
So 3 things: be generous with your time, try and help people, and not necessarily expecting anything in return, but be generous with your time. I think you should be systematic. So there's a piece around understanding who your network is, making sure you stay in touch with people, And thirdly, of course, be brave. I know, to move forward, sometimes we have to step outside our comfort zones. So be brave.
Yeah, sometimes it's not impossible. It's just a little bit uncomfortable at first.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay. Fortune favors the brave, I'm told.
Oh, but it was just on that high note, that bombshell of advice. Amazingly, well, not amazingly, because these things always fly by. Our time is up on things. Just to let everybody know that we've got the next Career Insight session is on Tuesday, the 10th of March. AI tools every job seeker needs, which is hot topic at the moment. Gentlemen, can I say thank you very, very much for joining me on the LinkedIn live sofa, so to speak, and talking all things networking. It's been an absolute joy having you both with me. The big guns didn't disappoint. So thank you for that. And by all means, everyone, carry the conversation on LinkedIn. This has been recorded, so you can watch it back. You may already be doing that now, as I say that. But we'll carry on commenting and replying to any comments and messages on there. So thank you very much. I am going to end the stream now and say thank you very much and bye for now.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.